November 22nd, 1963. President John F. Kennedy is gunned down in Dallas. A crushing blow to the country and a personal affront to FBI agent Don Adams.
Oh, it shocked me. It devastated me. And I thought to myself, what did I do wrong?
Adams is retired, but still can't shake the assassination or investigation by the Warren Commission.
The first weapon they found in the building was a Mauser.
Mauser German-made rifle with the sniper scope sights that was found on the German-built Mauser with the sniper scope that was used to kill President Kennedy.
7.65 Mauser, German rifle, familiar to those who served in World War II.
Place. It's a 7.65 Mauser, German-made army rifle, telescopic sight, and one shell left in the chamber. 3 spent shells have been found nearby, and apparently they're hooking this as the word that a Mauser has been found.
Mauser.
Oswald worked in the building where the murder weapon, the German-made Mauser rifle, was
one still found in the Mauser with which the assassin was apparently armed.
At what range would it be effective? That is a rifle.
From Dallas, we have heard that the definite identification has been made of the type of rifle used in the assassination of President Kennedy. It was not a Mauser, as has been reported through most of yesterday and today, but an Italian Manlicher Carcanto, manufactured in the Italian town of Carcanto.
Unbeknownst to many people, another weapon seen here was also recovered.
I was involved in several plots to kill Castro or his brother Raul.
Who ordered you to kill Castro?
I'm not able to go ahead and tell you at the present time.
CIA did.
I will not answer that question at the present time.
Sturgis says KGB General Alexander Alexeyev was in charge of the assassination. Alexeyev was the Soviet ambassador to Cuba from 1962 to 68 and is now retired, living in Moscow. According to Sturgis, the plan began when former Marine Lee Harvey Oswald entered the Soviet Union in 1959. As the FBI has documented, Oswald stayed in Russia for about 2 years and then came back to America. Only Sturgis says it was not really Oswald who arrived back here. It was an Oswald look-alike, a KGB agent named Ivan Leo Astatavo. Sturgis says he saw official U.S. government records proving the existence of the Oswald double.
I saw the records that the Oswald, the real Oswald of the Marine Corps, was taller, eyes different, scars on his body was different.
Then the Oswald that came out, the Oswald
Came out,
double.
that was killed by Jack Ruby, certainly.
You saw the difference with your own eyes.
I saw the difference in the records, yeah.
Where are those records now?
Would be in the National Archives, where nobody can get them for 75 years.
Once in the United States, according to Sturgis, the Oswald double was ordered by his KGB superiors to kill JFK, and he had help. At least one other gunman fired in Dallas.
One or possibly two people behind the grassy knoll, but at least one who fired the shot that penetrated the throat of the president in front.
Who was that?
KGB agent.
A Russian agent.
A KGB agent.
Enter Jack Ruby. Sturgis says Ruby had a business association with Fidel Castro, and U.S. government investigators have uncovered information that Ruby may have been selling guns to Castro.
What role did Jack Ruby play in the assassination, the entire plot?
In the end, Ruby was ordered to help in the escape of Oswald after the assassination. And because of the screw-up that happened where Oswald was caught, the next order was for Ruby to kill Oswald.
One clarification here. When Sturgis refers to Oswald, he is talking about the KGB agent Astatavo, the Oswald double.
So Ruby killed Oswald in front of the American public. Why would he do that? He knows he can't get away.
Well, he was ordered to kill Oswald to save his own life. They told Ruby that what you would be doing in killing Oswald would be a very patriotic thing for the United States, and that you would only serve a very short time in prison and be released as a hero.
And Ruby bought that, huh?
Certainly he bought it. He knows that he could be eliminated at any time if he does not follow the orders.
So you're saying Ruby was working for the KGB?
Ruby was working for the Cuban intelligence service.
The Cubans?
Yes, sir.
You know that to be a fact?
Yes, sir, I do.
Soon after the assassination, Sturgis says the CIA and FBI brought evidence to President Lyndon Johnson, suggesting the Soviet Union was involved in JFK's murder. Sturgis says CIA contacts told him Johnson and his advisors were afraid to make the information public.
We were on the brink of nuclear war. If we go into a nuclear war, what would happen? Millions and millions of people on both sides would be just wiped off the face of the earth. So they devised a cover-up.
Part of that cover-up included switching bodies. The real Lee Harvey Oswald's body replaced Astatavo's.
There was a switch.
Body switch?
A body switch, yes. Because we have two Oswalds, not one.
So whose body is interred now?
Would be the real Oswald.
Your sources, the sources for the story, the incredible story you're telling us today. Cuban intelligence?
Yes, sir.
Russian intelligence?
Yes, sir.
U.S. intelligence?
Yes, sir.
So what you're really saying in this whole story is that the Soviet Union, through the KGB, successfully assassinated the President of the United States with the help of Fidel Castro and got away with it.
Yes. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Sturgis told me he wants his story out because he himself has been accused of having something to do with the assassination. He says he is tired of hearing lies.
Yes, I did when I mentioned about Adlai Stevens, if he was vice president, there would never have been an assassination of our beloved President Kennedy. Would you explain it, Grant? Well, the answer is the man in office now.
crisis gathered over America. After a deluded gunman assassinated President Kennedy, our nation turned to Gerald Ford and a select handful of others to make sense of that madness. And the conspiracy theorists can say what they will, but the Warren Commission report will always have the final definitive say on this tragic matter. Why? Because Jerry Ford put his name on it, and Jerry Ford's word was always good.
And they'll push and I'll say no, and they'll push again and I'll say to them, read my lips. No new taxes.
Fast forward again to August 2nd, 1990. Iraq attacks Kuwait, claiming the Kuwaitis are slant drilling into Iraq's oil fields. U.S. President George Herbert Walker Bush pushes for a land war against Iraq. But polls show the U.S. public is split 50-50 on that idea. Then comes this eyewitness testimony before a congressional committee from a 15-year-old Kuwaiti girl. The claim is she cannot be identified for fear of reprisals.
While I was there, I saw the Iraqi soldiers come into the hospital with guns. They took the babies out of the incubators. Took the incubators and left the children to die on the cold floor.
The U.S. public is outraged. The result? Support for land war zooms. It's a turning point. Desert Storm is launched. 135,000 Iraqis are killed. An estimated 1 million Iraqis, many of them children and old people, then die as a result of 10 years of sanctions. One small problem. There never were any incubator baby deaths, not one. The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation's investigative flagship program, The Fifth Estate, reveals the girl to be the Kuwaiti ambassador's daughter, given her lines and coached in acting by the giant American PR firm Hill & Knowlton. It's one phase in a $10 million joint U.S.-Kuwaiti campaign of deception. This man is lying.
I myself buried 14 newborn babies that had been taken from their incubators.
This man is lying.
And they had kids in incubators, and they were thrown out of the incubators so that Kuwait could be systematically dismantled.
There were a lot of people who participated in a conspiracy. Yes, an out-and-out conspiracy of fake organizations, false documents, fraud, and disinformation.
We're beginning a joint press conference between the President of the United States, George Bush, and President Sergeyevich Gorbachev. There are many things that are important which are still ahead within the framework of this big political international event. So that you almost agree with everything I've said.
What I heard, I liked. No, but
Спасибо за честное признание.
once again, this might be an appropriate time for Barbara and me to thank the President, Mrs. Gorbachev, for this fantastic hospitality. And yes, I couldn't agree more about the productive nature of the talks, the enhancement of mutual understanding. This is not diplomatic language. In my view, this is fact. You know my views on the START agreement. Indeed, it's the culmination of a long and historic negotiation. And I happen to believe that the winners on this are the young people, not just in the Soviet Union, not just in the United States, but all around the world. And we are taking major steps in transforming our economic relations. President Gorbachev touched on some of this, but we're going to send up the trade agreement to the U.S. Congress. We're going to grant most favored nation status now that the technicalities have been worked out. We have fulfilled thus our Malta goal, Mr. President, of normalizing our economic relationship. We agreed here to tackle the next challenge. President Gorbachev talked about that, furthering economic reform in the USSR and seeking to integrate the Soviet economy into the international system.
Bonsoir, le coup d'État a échoué en URSS, mais le duel politique commence. Première apparition et première poignée de main cet après-midi entre Mikhail Gorbatchev et Boris Eltsine, le président de Russie qui veut apparemment prendre de vitesse le numéro 1 soviétique sur des réformes essentielles. Claire Sébastien.
4. Yeltsin intervient alors et propose
Так вот, не первый раз я вам говорю, что вы провалились.
Well, now for the first time I can tell you that you're a disaster.
Russia has seen its share of disappointment since the breakup of the Soviet Union in the 90s. The disparity in the distribution of wealth between the rich and the poor continues to grow. Living conditions for many millions are quite literally in tatters. And as Russia feels the effects of the financial crisis, many fear the situation will worsen. Galina Lebdova has assurances from her local council that repairs are on their way. While Oksana Karimova despairs at the dilapidated, mosquito-ridden living conditions she's forced to raise her grandchildren in. We have to cover her with a blanket to save her from the bites. It's really hard for me. I'm only 40 years old. I was left without a job and it just kills me that I cannot help my grandchildren.
one or possibly two people behind the grassy knoll, but at least one who fired the shot that penetrated the throat of the president in front.
Who was that?
KGB agent.
Was known simply as the Babushka Lady.
I had President Kennedy right in my zoom lens. You know, I could see Connally anytime. He's a Texan, right? Appreciate him, love him, he's great, but I wanted to see the president.
In the carnival atmosphere surrounding the motorcade, there was no indication of the danger lurking seconds away in Dealey Plaza.
When I first heard a noise, I was not aware that that was a shot being fired, and maybe perhaps that's why I continued to film, because I thought it was a backfire or a firecracker. I mean, I wasn't used to being around guns. I did not realize that those were shots until I saw in the frame of my camera President Kennedy's head come off the back of his head. Then I realized that that was a shot. I don't know how many I heard. I know where I thought the shots came from. Was the picket fence area in that, around that large tree somewhere on the other side of those steps, but in the picket fence area. There was a figure there and there was smoke there. I will always believe that the man that shot President Kennedy was standing somewhere in the picket fence area.
After the assassination, Beverly was contacted at work by FBI agents who took her undeveloped film and promised to return it within 10 days. She has not seen it since.
From the position that I was filming, I had the best shot of the assassination, and probably the only one that had a real good shot of the grassy knoll. And probably would be a lot of unanswered questions answered if my film could be found.
Fortunately, a few feet to Beverly's left, Mary Ann Moorman in the dark coat took her picture a split second after the president had been fatally struck in the head. Although frequently examined by the FBI, her historic snapshot was too widely publicized to disappear.
We know that the president's car was in the center.
Its dramatic secret, however, has only recently been uncovered. After 5 years of intensive study of the Moorman picture by two researchers in Texas, Jack White and Gary Mack, there is at last convincing evidence of a gunman up on the grassy knoll.
Is the guy that we call Badge Man, and it appears to me that from our study of it, his waist is right at the top of the wooden fence.
Gary Mack was the first to isolate the image, now known as Badge Man.
What I was looking at, to a lot of people, might have just been like looking at an ink blot or something. And all of a sudden, I started to see eyes and ears and forehead and hair. And little by little, the pieces of this image started to make sense to me. And that's when I first called Jack, and with his photographic work doing the blow-ups, we could see more and more and more detail. And at one point, we realized that this fellow was probably wearing a police uniform, or some type of uniform that was close enough to what the Dallas police were wearing, so that he could pass as a police officer.
And in 1963, Gordon Arnold was a 22-year-old serviceman, just out of training camp and en route to a posting in Alaska. This is his first film interview.
On that particular morning, what happened was I came downtown and I thought there was going to be a parade. So what I did was I parked my vehicle back here in this parking lot, and I intentionally walked to this particular corner because I wanted to take pictures of the parade off of the railroad bridge. Well, this is about as far as I got, because what happened is when I got my leg to about this position, a man came around the corner off the bridge, had a suit on, and he turned around and he told me that I wasn't going to be there. And I guess I was younger and more spunky at that time, because I told him, you and who else is going to keep me off the bridge? And he pulled out an identification card and he said, I'm with the CIA. And I said, well, that's enough muscle. I'll leave. So I turned around and brought my leg back over like this. I walked down the fence line here about halfway. And I was looking over the fence to see if I could get a good shot of the parade. And he come back up and he told me, he says, I told you to get out of this area. And I said, okay. So I walked the complete length of the fence, got around on the other side. That's when I started to line up my frame so that I could take the picture of the parade. I had been panning shots through here so that I could get whatever was going to come down the street. And I saw that it was the President of the United States. And as I was panning down this direction, just as I got to about this position, a shot come right past my left ear. And that meant it would have had to have come from this direction. And that's when I fell down. And to me, it seemed like a second shot was at least fired over my head. There's a bunch of report going on in this particular area at that time. And what happened was that while I was laying on the ground, it seemed like a gentleman came from this particular direction. And I thought it was a police officer because he had a uniform of a police officer. But he didn't wear a hat, and he had dirty hands. But it didn't really matter much at that time because with him crying like he was, and with him shaking when he had the weapon in his hand, I think I'd have gave him almost anything except the camera because that was my mother's. And literally what the man did was kick me and asked me if I was taking a picture. I told him that I was. And when I looked at the weapon, it was about that big around, and I decided I'd let him go ahead and have the film. I gave it to him, and then he went back off in this direction. I went off in this direction. And 3 days later, I was in Alaska. And I didn't come back to the United States for about 18 months.
This colorized version of the Badgeman picture was shown to Gordon Arnold for the first time. He has always believed there was no proof of his presence on the knoll that day.
Looks like a soldier in summer uniform with an overseas cap on. It looks like it would have been my uniform. And it looks like there's a camera. Or there's something up in front of the face. It looks like a white spot. If it's a flash, it would be like off of a muzzle flash. This looks like a police officer because that would be the badge. That would be the arm emblem. Would this fella back here be the railroad man I asked you about this morning? Because when I was walking to the site, and I had never told anybody that I had, when we were out there filming, it reminded me that there was a railroad worker just standing out there by the railroad tracks. But it looks like somebody's taking a picture. Yeah, I couldn't figure out why would I be standing crooked until I flipped that up, and if that's a muzzle blast or flash, then whoever's standing there would have been a fool to stand up straight. He'd been trying to get away from harm's way is what it boils down to. And that could very well be me. Son of a gun. That would be the closest thing that I've ever... To be honest with you, the picture bothers me because if this is a true thing of what has occurred, then I could be the only one that saw the man. They killed the president. And to be honest with you, if I'd have known this, I wouldn't have given any interview.
However, his story is confirmed by another eyewitness, Ed Hoffman, a deaf mute who is interviewed here for the first time.
I'd gotten off work early because I had a dentist's appointment. I was traveling down the freeway here, and I remembered that President Kennedy was coming to visit Dallas. I parked my car here. I realized at this spot that I would be able to see Kennedy pass close by. I stood here and waited, and I was looking towards where he would be coming from. I suddenly saw two men who looked suspicious directly over there in the car park.
25 years ago, these trees did not obscure the view. From his position at the side of the freeway, Ed Hoffman could clearly see the car park area behind the grassy knoll.
I saw a man standing here, wearing a black hat and a blue jacket. I saw a puff of smoke, and I thought it was a cigarette, but it wasn't. He had a gun, and he walked towards the railroad. He tossed the gun to the second man. Then he turned and straightened his jacket, adjusted his hat, and walked casually away. The man with the striped shirt, the railroad shirt, walked over to the electrical box with the gun. He took the gun apart. He put it in a toolbox. He then walked slowly away in the direction of the railroad track. When the motorcade passed by below me here, I realized that Kennedy had been shot. I was horrified. I saw a policeman standing on the railroad bridge, and I tried to get his attention, but he didn't see me. So I got in my car and drove to the area where I had seen the two men. But there were so many people there, and I couldn't find them. I went to the FBI to tell them what I had seen. They didn't want me to say anything. They offered me money to keep quiet. They didn't understand that it was more important for me to tell them what I'd seen. It was hard for me to communicate with them. I do feel that the two men I saw were working together, and that the one with the gun behind the fence was the man who shot President Kennedy.
St. John Hunt is the son of E. Howard Hunt, the CIA spook who ran Vice President Nixon's hit squad, Operation 40, who reunited the old gang to break the law for President Nixon. He went to prison for masterminding the Watergate break-in. Hunt died in 2007, and he took his secrets with him. Well, not all of them.
Jesse Ventura is with the son of CIA operative E. Howard Hunt, about to hear Hunt's deathbed confession of his role in the JFK murder conspiracy.
Operation 40 and send it to Dallas.
And just point it in that direction. These guys were queued up and ready to go. They were locked, loaded, and ready to rumble.
The tapes added one more element. Another future president pulled into the plot. First Richard Nixon, then Gerald Ford, then George H.W. Bush. Now,
LBJ. He, in my opinion, had an almost maniacal urge to become president. He regarded JFK as an obstacle to achieving that.
Lyndon Baines Johnson, the vice president who became president. Now, this is the person that my dad implicated in the plot directly.
It was a very tempting and almost illogical move on his part. I keep thinking about Bill Harvey, call Harvey and say, look, there's some things I want to have done. I mean, Harvey didn't want just an additional CIA salary. He wanted to move on. And LBJ could do that for him if he were president. Right. He couldn't do much for Harvey or anybody as vice president. That was why he used Harvey as being available and corrupt. It was very easy for even the vice president to start working with Harvey or anybody else. Just say, I want you to do this, I want you to do that. And making sure that they had money that was not their own to do whatever the LBJ wanted to have done, so that when the president was assassinated, the vice president was right there and ready to move along. It doesn't speak well for our democracy at that particular time. He, in my opinion, had an almost maniacal urge to become president. He regarded JFK as he was, in fact, an obstacle to achieving that. He could have waited for JFK to finish out his term and then undoubtedly a second term. So that would have put the LBJ at the head of a long list of people who were waiting for some change in the executive branch. Harvey was just a very strange and complicated individual. A lot of people have sort of suggested that he was, that alcohol had taken control of him. First of all, he never should have been put in that position. I don't think that he had a pristine connection with anybody. Always had a gun on him, yeah. Particularly in Rome. Harvey even carried guns into restaurants, and he would pull them out, slap them down on the table to the dismay of other diners, and then he'd settle down to an afternoon of drinking, not eating much, but because he was way overweight, but certainly drinking. He had been a deputy to Angleton, and very deeply involved in counter-espionage activities.
Well, Harvey had written in a memo at one point when he was running the Executive Action Program that he wanted to use Corsicans.
Yeah, wanted to use what?
Corsicans.
Yeah.
As hitmen. Do you think it's possible that when he was in Rome that he might have recruited a Corsican assassin to kill Kennedy?
Yes. It is possible. I mean, it's one thing to set yourself up in splendid isolation, and it's another thing to use that isolation as a tool, so that you're not an immediate suspect in the case of a capital crime.
Right, because he was in Rome.
Is that understandable?
Yeah,
Okay.
Very. My understanding is that Harvey had a very severe clash with Bobby Kennedy around the time of the missile crisis, and that Kennedy basically
I think it was
said, "Get rid
earlier
of
than
this guy."
that, and he posted an old slogan somewhere in the agency premises that said, the tree of liberty must be nourished by the blood of patriots. And this incensed Bobby Kennedy. And they clashed on that particular point. Seems ridiculous. You would think that Bobby would have embraced that particular philosophy, but he did not. And I guess he figured that Harvey was trying to steal some of the glory of whatever was going on in those days.
During the Cuban Missile Crisis, everything was extremely tense. And suddenly it was discovered that Harvey had sent a team of people into Cuba. And the Kennedys were very concerned that this crisis might explode into nuclear war. And Robert Kennedy particularly was in a rage when he heard that this loose cannon had added a further element of unpredictability to the situation.
Harvey hated the Kennedys. After the Cuban Missile Crisis, he had a confrontation with Bobby Kennedy that virtually ended his career, exiling him to an intelligence station in Rome.
We had a terrible experience with the ones that were handling it at the time of the missile crisis. They were going to send 60 people into Cuba right during the missile crisis. Nobody knew what they were doing, and we pinned it down to the fellow he was supposed to be in charge, and he said we planned it because the military wanted it done, and I asked the military, and they never heard of it.
Oh my God.
This is the same fellow who did put the tunnel under Berlin, and so he was, you remember that tunnel in 1948? They constructed a tunnel under and built it up into the intelligence office of which was a hell of a project.
Based on his service with the FBI and years researching National Archives, Don Adams says at best the Kennedy assassination is a massive failure to communicate between federal agencies and then cover-up. At worst, it's conspiracy to commit murder.
It's embarrassing because I love the FBI. It's a great organization, best law enforcement agency in the business. But we also have to face facts and reality that there are bad people in this world.
The Army War veteran joined the agency in 1962. He was assigned to Thomasville, Georgia, where he began investigating Joseph Miltier, a name unfamiliar to many, but not the government.
He was reported to be one of the most violent men in the country.
A militant activist with ties to hate groups like the KKK. November 1963, an FBI informant named William Somerset said Miltier was threatening JFK.
Saying bad things about what they wanted to do to Kennedy.
Miltier frequently discussed assassinating President Kennedy. A threat was even captured on tape by Miami intelligence officers November 9th, 1963, just weeks before Dallas. Miltier is talking to Somerset.
Well, how the hell do you do it the best way would be good? From an old still with a high heart rifle. And they're going to really try to kill it.
He describes smuggling a gun into the building.
They they all those guns come out now and you take them apart. Boy, if that Kennedy gets shot, we got to know where we at. They'll pick up somebody within an hour of that. Throw the public off.
It should have stopped the president from traveling instantly.
It didn't, and November 22nd, Miltier is photographed near the motorcade moments before the assassination.
They messed up, and all the other agencies messed up.
Evidence he saw while stationed in Dallas proves it, beginning with the Zapruder film.
And all of a sudden I saw the president go like this with his hands. And I said, Hal, I said, he was shot in the throat. The agent said to me, Don, be careful what you say. And there were no shots from the front.
But Don says this photo shows a bullet hole through the windshield.
The very first thing that the doctor said was, Hal, he was shot in the throat. That's a bullet hole. The minute that you have a frontal shot, Oswald can't be the shooter, because this came from the grassy knoll. And Oswald was in Texas School Book Depository.
The Warren Commission ruled that 3 shots were fired, but Don counted 11. And at the book depository, he wondered how Oswald did that in 7.5 seconds from a bolt-action rifle.
Because I was in Korea and I know what I'm talking about.
Witnesses reported Oswald was in the lunchroom 4 floors down on the opposite side of the building drinking a Coke after the first shot.
No heavy perspiration or heavy breathing or anything. Couldn't have been done. It was impossible.
Afterward, while Oswald was arrested, Miltier was, quote, jubilant, bragging to Somerset, "You thought I was kidding when I said he would be killed from a window with a high-powered rifle." He told sources in the KKK, "Don't worry about Oswald. He doesn't know anything."
All this stuff bothers me.
Upsetting to many people. In 1976, the U.S. House of Representatives Select Committee on Assassinations was established. They determined a shot was fired from the grassy knoll and in summary believed, quote, on the basis of evidence available, President Kennedy was probably assassinated as a result of a conspiracy, though they were unable to identify the other gunmen.
The images between the sprocket holes could only be seen on slides of the original film. This is the first time that those images can be seen as part of a motion sequence. Zapruder frame numbers are also displayed for research purposes. This is a replay with the images between the sprocket holes, this time in slow motion. This version tracks the limousine and maintains President Kennedy and Governor Connally at center frame. This version is only in slow motion. This version zooms in on the image as much as possible without causing deterioration. President Kennedy is kept at center frame. This is only in slow motion. These images, decades later, are still disturbing.
Where were you employed on November 22nd, 1963?
At that time, I was employed as a tower operator for the Union Terminal Company.
And where were you at about 12:30 that day?
I was at the south end of the terminal of the tower building, rather looking down toward the terminal and observing the motorcade, as was everyone else in the area. Now, this man performed a similar action, and he toured down around the area probing to examine the exits, and seemed at one or more occasions to have a mic or something resembling such an instrument up to his face. Just a few moments after that, the third car came into the area, and these were the only three cars that entered this area during this specific period. The third car was a 6102 Chevrolet. This car was muddy all the way up to the windows as if it had just come in off the road. It had an out-of-state license identical to the first car of the series. And it also had political stickers on it, which were not only for the same candidate, but were identical in nature and color, so that they appeared to have been from the same group. This car was occupied by one male who spent a little bit more time in the area than the others, and probed down by the side of the tower where I was located. I could not state that these cars left the area entirely, because after they got back onto the extension of Elm Street in front of the school depository building, they were lost to my vision, so that they could have remained very close by. Immediately after the shots were fired, of course, was mass confusion, to put it mildly. But the area was immediately sealed off by, I would say, at least 50 police within 3 to 5 minutes. The first one to appear on the scene, other than those who, of course, who were standing around, including 2 on top of the triple underpass, was one who rode a motorcycle up the incline coming up from the lower portion of Elm Street. And he rode perhaps 2/3 of the way up or more before he deserted his motorcycle. At the time of the shooting, in the vicinity of where the 2 men I've described were, there was a flash of light, there was something which occurred which caught my eye in this immediate area on the embankment. And what this was, I could not state at that time, and at this time I could not identify it, other than there was some unusual occurrence, a flash of light or smoke or something which caused me to feel like something out of the ordinary had occurred there.
In reading your testimony, Mr. Bowers, it appears that just as you were about to make that statement, you were interrupted in the middle of the sentence by the commission counsel, who then went into another area.
Well, that's correct. I was there only to tell them what they asked, and so that when they seemed to want to cut off the conversation, I felt like that was, as far as I was concerned, that was the end of it.
Mr. Bowers, how many shots did you hear?
There were 3 shots, and these were spaced with 1 shot, then a pause, and then 2 shots in very close order, such as perhaps almost on top of each other, while there was some pause between the first and the second shots.
Did you tell that to the Dallas police?
Yes, I told this to the police, and then also told it to the FBI, and also I had a discussion 2 or 3 days later with them concerning this, and they made no comment, other than the fact that when I stated I felt like the second and third shots could not have been fired from the same rifle, they reminded me that I wasn't an expert, and I had to agree.
As the presidential limousine was rounding the curve on Elm Street, there was a loud explosion. At the time, I didn't know what it was, but it sounded like a loud firecracker or a gunshot. And it sounded like it came from the left and in front of us, towards the wooden fence. And there was a puff of smoke that came underneath the trees on the embankment. I was talking with a patrolman Foster at the time, and as soon as we heard the shots, we ran around to the wooden fence. And when we got there, there was no one there, but there was footprints in the mud around the fence, and there was footprints on the wooden 2x4 railing on the fence.
Were you questioned by the Dallas police on that day?
Yes, I was.
Did you give your name to the Dallas police?
Yes, I did.
Did you tell them what you've just told me?
Yes, I did.
Were you subsequently questioned by agents of the Federal Bureau of Investigation?
About a month later, I was questioned by the FBI.
Did you tell them what you told me and what you told the Dallas police?
Yes, I did.
Were you ever called as a witness by the Warren Commission?
No, sir, I wasn't.
And did you see anything which might indicate to you where the shots came from?
Well, we all four seen about the same thing. As the shots, the smoke came from behind the hedge.
And I saw a puff of smoke still lingering underneath the trees in front of the wooden fence.
Is this the exact spot you were standing on November 22nd, Mr. Holland?
That's correct. This is the exact spot that I was standing November the 22nd, waiting for the parade.
And where did you hear that third shot come from?
Right over about 20 or 30 feet from the other end of that little picket fence.
And where was the smoke that you saw?
It drifted right out underneath those green trees, those two trees.
From behind the fence?
From behind the fence. It kind of hung there just like for a few seconds, long enough that you could see that it was
and then what
puff of smoke.
And then what'd you do?
Immediately after the president's car came underneath this overpass, four of us broke a run around this fence to find out if we could see anybody leaving the area.
Can we walk this way now that you went on the 22nd?
No, we can walk that way right now.
Fine.
We were trying to see what we could see, and
this was the direction you walked on the 22nd?
This was the direction. Made this right turn. Jumped this steam line, this pipe. One man right behind me jumped, and another one jumped right on top of him.
Fell on top of him?
Fell on top of him.
And were there more cars here on the 22nd than there are today?
They were bumper to bumper. It's just a sea of cars. You couldn't hardly get through them. We were jumping over the bumpers, over the hood of the cars to work our way to the spot that we saw the smoke and heard the shot. Then we came up to the wooden fence.
Mr. Holland, did you remain behind here for a while when the police officers were searching the area?
Approximately 15 minutes before I had to go back to my office. There was about 40 or 50 people around here searching.
And what did you find here?
A lot of footprints behind this car, mud on the bumpers. And I looked around to see if I could find some empty shells or any evidence of a shot being fired and the bullet shell rejected from the gun. And this is where I saw the smoke from the third shot.
The Warren Commission published just a very small portion of your testimony and used your testimony as proof that no shots could have come from behind the fence. Did they accurately and fairly use your testimony?
They are wrong, because my testimony, and I made it very clear, that there was a fourth shot fired, and one of those shots came from behind that picket fence.